The battlefield was broken, but what he found among the ashes would shake the future of two worlds. A human soldier sent on a secret mission discovers a lost alien girl, frightened, silent, and powerful beyond belief. As war rages around them, one choice sparks an unlikely bond and a forbidden rescue becomes a fight for peace. Enemies become allies. Silence becomes hope. But can one act of compassion stop a war? Stay with us, because this story isn't just about survival. It's about the bridge that could unite the stars, or burn them down. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Let's move toward wonderful story. The night sky was filled with smoke, flickering with the flashes of distant explosions. The air was heavy with dust and the bitter smell of burned metal. Riven crouched behind a half-destroyed wall made from dark stone, his breathing slow but alert. His uniform was stained with ash and mud, his helmet cracked from earlier impact. He had been on missions before, but this one felt different. Quiet orders, vague details, no backup, just a single goal. Enter enemy land and retrieve something. Or someone. He hadn't been told much, only that an important figure had vanished during one of the last battles. The alien race, known as the Virulans, had started searching too. Rumors spread that it was a child, possibly a young royal. But no one gave him a name, just coordinates, a deadline, and a warning. Don't get caught. The higher-ups claimed it could change everything, turn the war in their favor. But to Riven, it sounded like politics wrapped in blood. He didn't ask questions. That wasn't his job. Moving through the ruins of what once was a small Virulan settlement, Riven's boots crunched over shattered glass and alien pottery. Strange symbols lined the walls, still glowing faintly even in the dark. The silence was unsettling. No patrols, no civilians, just the wind whistling through hollow buildings. His grip tightened on his pulse rifle as he crept down a crumbled corridor, eyes scanning every shadow. Then he heard it. A soft noise. Barely a sound, more like a breath. Instinct made him freeze. He turned his head slowly toward a collapsed structure. Part of the ceiling had caved in, but behind the debris something moved. Carefully, he lowered his weapon and stepped closer. The light from his visor cast a soft glow across the rubble, revealing a figure curled up near a broken pillar. It was a girl. She looked young, maybe 13, maybe older. It was hard to tell with Virulans. Her skin shimmered like moonlight, smooth and pale with faint patterns that seemed to pulse. Long hair spilled around her shoulders, silver like starlight. Her clothes were torn, dusty, but regal in design. She clutched something in her arms, a small locket glowing faintly green. Riven raised his hand slowly. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, voice steady despite the tension in his muscles. The girl didn't move. Her wide eyes shimmered, with fear and confusion, glowing with a soft green light that reflected in the darkness. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The war had taught them both not to trust. But something about the way she looked at him, so uncertain yet not entirely afraid, made him step forward again. "You're the one they're looking for," he said quietly. "Your people are searching for you, so are mine." Still, she said nothing. Her eyes dropped to the locket in her hands. Then with a shaky breath, she reached out, just a little. Riven crossed the distance and gently helped her to her feet. She trembled, her small frame barely holding steady. He could feel how fragile she was beneath the surface. They started moving. Slowly at first, then faster as the sounds of war echoed nearby. The ground trembled from distant blasts. Riven kept one hand on the girl's back, guiding her over fallen beams and through tight corridors. She followed without complaint, though she stumbled more than once. He never let go of her hand. Each step was a challenge. Every corner could be a trap. But Riven stayed focused. He couldn't explain it, but something had shifted inside him. This wasn't just a mission anymore. It was something more. Something personal. As they crossed a wide opening between buildings, lights flashed in the distance. Enemy patrol. Riven ducked behind a rusted vehicle, pulling the girl close. Her breathing was sharp, fast, but she didn't cry. Instead, she whispered something in her language, soft, melodic words he couldn't understand. He didn't reply. He just waited, heart pounding. The patrol passed without noticing them, and they moved on. At one point, they paused beneath the skeleton of a destroyed tower. Riven offered her water. She took it with both hands, drinking carefully. Her gaze met his, uncertain but curious. "You're different," she said finally. Her voice was quiet, accented but clear. Riven blinked. "Different how?" "You don't look at me like I'm wrong." He didn't know what to say. Maybe because she wasn't wrong. Maybe because he was tired of a war that made enemies out of children. He gave a small nod. "I just want to get you home." She looked down again, fingers tightening around the locket. "Home," she whispered, as if the word itself hurt. They continued through the night, walking through fire-lit shadows and over cracked earth. Riven knew they were far from safe. He also knew that returning with her would bring questions, accusations. But as he looked at her beside him, tired, scared, but still standing, he felt a responsibility he couldn't explain. This girl, whoever she really was, didn't belong in the middle of a war. She deserved to live, to return to her people. And he was going to make sure she did, even if it meant risking everything. The silent mission had begun. But the silence wouldn't last forever. Riven kept his steps light as he led the alien girl, Serin, as she had finally told him, through the rocky outskirts of the Virilan wasteland. The landscape stretched far and dead around them, burned by war and poisoned air. They had escaped the ruins, but the journey was only growing more dangerous. Each hour, the weight of what he was doing pressed harder on his chest. He wasn't just escorting a survivor anymore. He was smuggling someone precious through enemy lines, someone many would kill to control. Serin walked beside him in silence, her silver hair tangled with dust, her green eyes always alert. Though she looked young and fragile, there was a calmness in her that felt older than her years. She didn't complain even when her legs trembled. She didn't ask to stop, though her lips were dry and cracked. Riven noticed her glancing at the sky now and then, as if looking for something. Or someone. Back at the human base, trouble was brewing. Captain Durrell stood in front of a screen, watching satellite footage of Riven's last known position. His eyes narrowed as he zoomed in. The scout hadn't returned. Worse, new scans showed 2 heat signatures moving together in Virilan territory. Durrell clenched his jaw. That wasn't part of the plan. Riven had been ordered to retrieve the target, not go rogue. He tapped the screen, sending the file to command. "Track them," he ordered, "and prepare a retrieval team. I want answers." On the alien side, whispers of Serin's return had begun to spread. In a chamber lit by soft blue light, Thena, an intelligence officer for the Virilans, read a secret report. A human soldier had been seen guiding a figure that matched Serin's description. Thena narrowed her eyes. That couldn't be possible. Serin had been presumed dead. Some had even believed her to be a myth, a story invented by hopeful factions who dreamed of peace. But if she was alive and in human hands, it changed everything. Meanwhile, Riven and Serin took shelter in a cave as a dust storm rolled across the plain. Inside, the air was cool and dry. Riven lit a small lantern and unwrapped a protein bar, offering it to Serin. She took it, hesitating at first, then ate slowly. The silence stretched between them. Finally, Serin broke it. "Why did you help? Me?" she asked, her voice soft. Riven looked at her, unsure how to explain. He had asked himself the same question more than once. It had started as duty, just another mission. But somewhere along the path it became more than that. Maybe it was the way she looked at the world, like she still believed it could change. "You didn't deserve to be left behind," he said, simply. "No one does." Serin studied him for a moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. That night, neither of them slept much. Riven kept his weapon close, listening for the sound of drones or patrols. Serin sat near the entrance of the cave, eyes fixed on the swirling storm outside. There was sadness in her gaze, but something else too: determination. In the morning, they continued their journey toward the neutral zone, a stretch of land untouched by both sides, where Viralan refugees were said to hide. Riven hoped to find someone who could help Saren return home safely. But as they neared the edge of the neutral zone, danger found them first. Viel, a tall Virellan warrior with deep blue skin and golden markings, stepped into their path with a team of scouts behind him. His weapon was drawn, and his sharp eyes went straight to Saren. "You're alive," he said, his voice full of disbelief. Saren stepped forward before Riven could react. "Viel," she said firmly, "I need your help, but only if you trust me." Viel looked from her to Riven, his jaw tight. "You're with a human." Riven lifted his hands, ready to explain, but Saren raised her voice. "He saved me. He protected me when no one else did. That should count for something." The moment hung in silence. The Virellan soldiers looked uneasy, their hands twitching near their weapons. Viel stared at Saren, the conflict clear on his face. Then, after a long pause, he lowered his weapon. "Come," he said. "We must speak, in private." They followed him to a hidden camp where Saren was quickly recognized. Some bowed, some whispered. Riven watched it all from the side, feeling more like an intruder than ever. Thana arrived shortly after, flown in by special transport. She didn't hide her suspicion. "You expect us to believe he helped you?" she asked Saren, her voice hard. "I don't expect anything," Saren replied calmly, "but I know the truth." Riven stood quietly, letting her speak. He knew no words of his could change their minds. Only actions would matter now. That night, Thena and Viel spoke privately. Thena argued that Saren's return could spark hope, but also unrest. Some would see it as a sign to negotiate peace. Others, especially the hardliners, would see it as a threat. Viel wasn't sure where he stood, but he had seen something real in Saren's eyes. Back at the human base, Darrell's team had landed in the neutral zone, orders in hand. "Capture. Riven, bring the girl. Do not fail." As dawn approached, the shadows of loyalty stretched long over both sides. Friendships would be tested, secrets would be revealed, and the mission that began in silence was about to shake two worlds. The morning light was pale and cold when Saren stepped outside the small Virellan shelter deep within the neutral zone. The air smelled of earth and fresh rain. Around her, Virellan refugees moved quietly, trying to stay invisible in a world where trust had become a rare and dangerous thing. She stood alone for a moment, letting the silence wash over her, but there was no peace in her heart. Everything was shifting. Rumors spread quickly, too quickly, and with each passing hour, more eyes turned toward her with a mix of hope and fear. Inside the camp, Riven sat across from Viel and Thena. Maps and communication logs covered the table between them. The tension in the room was heavy. Thena still didn't trust Riven, and she made no effort to hide it. Viel was harder to read, but his silence was a weight of its own. "The humans are closing in," Thena said finally, pointing to a blinking light on the map. "Your people are sending soldiers, not diplomats. They're not here to negotiate." Riven frowned. "Then why hasn't command tried to reach me directly?" "Maybe they already have," Thena replied. "And maybe they don't like what you've become." Riven pushed back his chair and stood up. "I haven't become anything. I'm still a soldier. I still follow orders when they make sense." Thena's eyes narrowed. "You've risked everything for her." Riven didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth was obvious. He had crossed a line and there was no going back. Saren joined them moments later, her expression calm but her hands trembling slightly. "There's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice soft. "About my mother." Everyone turned to her. "She's alive," Saren continued. "She's been hiding from both sides, and I know where she is." The room went still. Malus had been a name long lost in silence. Once a respected leader of the Virulans, she had vanished during the early years of the war. Many believed she had been killed. Others said she had given up and disappeared. But Saren's words changed everything. She sent me away when things got dangerous, Saren explained. She feared that if people found out about me, about who I really was, they would use me. Thena folded her arms. And now you want to take us to her? Just like that? No, Saren said. I want you to help me get to her. Because she's the only one who can stop this war from getting worse. Riven spoke up. If she has any power left, she needs to use it now, before it's too late. They made a plan to move undercover, traveling by night. Vile would lead a small team. Riven and Saren would go ahead to prepare Malus. Thana agreed to stay behind and manage the camp, but even as they prepared, none of them knew how quickly the situation was collapsing. Back at the human base, confusion and suspicion ruled. Orders had shifted again. Captain Durrell had been replaced by an official named Aaron, a civilian with sharp eyes and a long memory. He didn't carry weapons, but he wielded information like a blade. He had come with one goal: to find Saren and uncover the truth about her connection to both sides. Aaron was one of the first to speak out when the war began. He had warned that fighting without understanding the enemy would only create more enemies. Now, years later, he had returned, not as a protester, but as a hunter of truth. He intercepted messages from the Virulan camp. One in particular stood out. A name. Maelis. That changes everything, Aaron said quietly to his assistant. She was the key. If she's alive, the war may not end, but it could be rewritten. Meanwhile, Saren and Riven moved quickly through the mountains near the old Virulan cities. The path was rough, filled with jagged rocks and narrow ledges. They didn't speak much. Both of them carried the weight of what was coming. Saren clutched the small locket around her neck, a simple object that held her only memory of her mother. A melody played when opened, one her mother had sung to her as a child. On the third day, they reached a quiet valley hidden by tall cliffs. A single stone tower stood in the center, surrounded by wildflowers and silence. Milas emerged before they reached the door. She hadn't aged much. Her long white robes blew in the wind, and her face, though tired, was proud. Saren ran to her without a word. Malus caught her in a tight embrace, and for a few moments, the world faded. But reality returned quickly. Malus looked at Riven. You brought her here, she said, her voice low. I promised I would, Riven replied. Malus studied him. Then you must know what comes next. I know things are about to get worse, he said, but maybe they don't have to. That night, Malus called a meeting. Messages were sent to old allies, secret groups who had stayed out of the war. She planned to speak publicly, to reveal that Saren had survived, and that peace was still possible. But word of her return spread faster than expected. The next morning, the valley shook with the sound of engines. Virulan ships flew overhead. Soldiers poured from the cliffs. At their head stood a man known only as Lorik, once loyal to Malus, now a leader of those who believed war was the only path to survival. Step aside, Lorik shouted, or fall with her. The breaking point had come. Peace stood on one side, war on the other, and Saren, with her voice, her name, and her past, stood in the middle, ready to decide the future. The sky above the valley darkened with the hum of ships, their shadows spreading across the fields below. Lorik's forces stood at the edge of the cliffs, weapons drawn and eyes cold. On the ground, Malus stepped forward with calm defiance. Behind her, Saren and Riven stood side by side, their faces tense but steady. There was no turning back now. The storm they had tried to outrun had finally caught them. Lorik raised his voice. You think peace is still possible? He shouted down. You think hiding here and gathering ghosts will save our people? You've already failed once, Malus. Don't make the same mistake again. Malus did not answer right away. Her gaze swept across the soldiers behind Lorik. Many of them were young. Many looked uncertain. She lifted her voice so all could hear. I did not hide. I waited. I waited for the moment when words could matter more than weapons. That moment is now. Lorik laughed bitterly. And you brought a human to prove your point? One soldier does not erase decades of war. Saren stepped forward, her voice stronger than ever before. He didn't erase the war. He saved me. He chose kindness when he had every reason to turn away. That matters, the soldiers above murmured. Some lowered their weapons just slightly. Lorik's jaw tightened. You've been poisoned, he said. You think this ends with speeches and symbols? It ends in fire. Before another word could be spoken, the sound of engines roared behind them. A fleet of Virellan ships approached. Not hostile but familiar. Loyalists, supporters of Malus who had answered her call in secret. Their arrival shifted the balance instantly. Lorik's forces now stood between two armies. The choice was clear: fight and fall, or listen. Lorik backed away, his face twisted with rage. This isn't over, he growled, disappearing into the shadows of the cliffs with his closest allies. The rest of his soldiers surrendered, laying down their weapons as silence returned to the valley. In the hours that followed, a fragile calm settled. The camp filled with new faces, Virellans who had once feared peace but were now willing to hear a different voice. Riven helped set up temporary shelters while Saren spoke with her mother in long, quiet conversations. They had years of silence to fill, and only days to prepare for what was next. A decision was made to speak to both worlds at once. The message would be broadcast through a shared channel, something that had never been attempted. Humans and Virellans would hear the same words at the same time. Saren would be the one to speak, not as a soldier or a princess, but as someone who had lived through the war and still believed something better was possible. When the day came, Saren stood before the camera. Her hands trembled slightly, but she did not flinch. Riven stood just off screen, watching with quiet pride. My name is Saren, she began, and I was hidden because people feared what I might become. I was not meant to lead. I was not trained to fight. But I have seen enough to know that this war cannot continue. She spoke simply, directly. She told them about the battlefield, about Riven's kindness, about the people on both sides who had helped her survive. She did not blame or accuse. She simply asked them to choose differently. Peace will not come easily, she said. There will be those who resist, but every future worth building begins with a step forward. I'm taking that step. I hope you will too. The message spread faster than anyone expected. Across planets and colonies, across outposts and shelters, people watched. Some cried, some turned off their screens, but many listened. In the weeks that followed, talks began between leaders who had once refused to sit in the same room. Riven returned to the human base, where some greeted him as a traitor, others as a hero. He gave no speeches. He didn't ask for forgiveness or fame. He simply told the truth. Later, he joined Saren and Malus at a newly formed assembly located on a neutral station orbiting a quiet moon. The chamber was plain but filled with light. Both Virellans and humans sat together for the first time. Saren stood at the center, not as a figurehead, but as a symbol of possibility. Riven stayed mostly in the background. He didn't belong to one world anymore, and maybe that was the point. He had crossed a line that many feared, but in doing so, he had helped build something new. One evening, as he stood on the viewing deck, watching the stars stretch across the sky, Saren joined him. Do you think it will last? She asked quietly. Riven thought for a moment before replying. I don't know. But I think people are tired of fighting. That's a good place to start. Saren nodded, her eyes soft. I used to wonder where I belonged, she said. Now I think maybe we all belong where we're needed most. They stood in silence, the echo of war still behind them, but the sound of something better just beginning to rise. Far away, in a quiet corner of the galaxy, an old signal blinked on. A message, long buried, flickered to life. The bridge has been built, it read. Now walk it, and they did, together.